Chapter 6, Jump Scare. The first time the voice said to me, "That can't go in your body," I was 16 in an Italian restaurant on Queen West in Toronto. A friend, Wibke, was letting me live with her just around the corner on Claremont Street. She had taken me to dinner to cheer me up after a difficult day. I met Wibke not long before I turned 15. She'd cast me in her first full-length film, Marion Bridge. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2002, where Wibke was awarded Best First Feature. It was a brilliant film that was originally a play by the legendary Cape Bretoner Daniel McIver. Agnes, played by Molly Parker, returns to her hometown to care for her dying mother, having fled a decade earlier to escape a household that was shrouded in vicious abuse. She reunites with her sisters, Teresa and Louise, their wounds half-scabbed, the blood seeping out in their own unique ways. That mysterious little goblin named Trauma, scuttling through the flesh. I played the object of Agnes's perplexing obsession, a teenager named Joni working at a gift shop in Marion Bridge, a rural community just 25 minutes from Sydney. Sitting behind the steering wheel in the gravel parking lot, Agnes sits and stares, eventually mustering up the courage to go inside. Joni is her biological child, whom she gave away for adoption when she was a teenager. Joni knows nothing of this. Suspicion grows as Agnes makes reoccurring visits. Worlds collide, secrets surface, truth laid bare. The waiter placed our food on the table, snapping me out of a stupor. I stared down at my margarita pizza. Wibke sat opposite of me, lifting the knife provided to cut hers. It had pears and ham. I zoomed out, departing from my body. "Nope." The voice spoke with a sinister tone. "That can't go inside of you." I'd had to call the police hours before. I had my first stalker. It did not begin like that. At first he became a friend, albeit a secret once. A covert pen pal for the previous 2 years or so. He had seen me on the CBC family drama Pit Pony, which first aired in early February 1999, when I was 11 years old and he was in his early 20s. Pit Pony was my first professional acting job. My work up until that point was comprised of a couple plays with the drama club in elementary school. For the first role, I was a dove, and I screwed up my one line, leaving a short pause before saying, "Oops." The audience laughed. The following year, I landed Charlie in the Chocolate Factory and had a more successful run. The thrill of playing a character so iconic to me, the thrill of playing a boy, organic and free. My bunk bed fort, but on stage. Perhaps people would see me. In 1996, a local actor and casting director named John Dunsworth came to my school. I was 9 years old. He was looking to cast the CBC movie of the week, Pit Pony, which was based on a young adult book of the same name. I remembered him interrupting music class with my favorite teacher, Mr. Ellis, who had once jokingly said I needed to stop roughhousing up the boys at recess, to my delight. We all stood in the class while Mr. Dunsworth had us do little exercises testing us. I was selected to audition. I showed up on the day, excited, yet not old enough to fully understand the significance. "Could you act like you're lost in the forest?" the casting director prompted. I turned my head swiftly, abruptly from the left to the right, spinning my body around, terrified at the night creeping in, abandoned in the cold dark. A game of imagination. "That was great. Now, could we try it with you being still? Can you show me that feeling with just your emotions?" I wasn't sure exactly what he meant, but I played along. I must have done something right because I got the part. I couldn't believe it. Another chance to get lost in a pretend world that felt more like reality than my own. It was assumed to be an anomaly, a delightful little surprise, but then the movie of the week turned into a television show, and my acting career began. I played the little sister, Maggie McLean. She wore dresses with long sleeves that hung below the knee. Over them, a smock. I was puzzled by the dress over the dress. Black tights covered my legs. My hair had grown out from when we shot the movie of the week, in which I wore a wig. Relentlessly itchy, it resembled a dead raccoon. I didn't want long hair, but I didn't want to wear that wig again. Around my shoulders, sometimes in braids, sometimes potentially a small bow. I can only imagine my mother's relief. Becoming a professional actor coincided with the end of me getting the "thanks, bud" at the mall. Growing my hair out for roles, body on the precipice of change, I would stare at the cis boys on set. Collar red shirts, suspenders, knickers, and no tights. Instead of bows, newsboy hats. How is that not me? I move like them. I play like them. A gnawing feeling from toddlerhood stored in the spine, like shingles, striking at a moment's notice, spreading across my body, nerves exposed. While making Pit Pony, my gender dysphoria was rife. The way the tights glued to my body, the way my dresses flowed, those fucking bows, like the barrettes my mom would snap in my hair, providing an unresolved, internalized tantrum. Getting ready for school, solo in the bathroom, I'd smash my head with a hairbrush. Who is that in the mirror? Squinting my eyes shut, bracing for it. Slam, slam, slam. My mother's queen bed had a frame that included tall wooden posts on the corners, the tops of them resembling upside-down ice cream cones. When I was alone, able to keep my secret, I would climb up onto the bed. I'd stare at the post, aligning my torso so the spike would drill directly into my stomach. I'd hoist my body up, conspiring with gravity to impale myself. It hurt, but it also didn't hurt. I loved having an outlet for my self-disdain, the nausea. I wanted it scooped out. Sitting in the den at my father's, I'd turn on the family computer, looking for an escape, another pretend world. I'd made a silly website in junior high school when we were learning about Hotmail in computer science class. The man who had seen me on CBC found the website and reached out through it. Over the course of a few emails, a connection began to grow, a companionship. We wrote of our grievances, our loneliness, our incongruence with our surroundings and with ourselves. Kid drama for me, something else for him. Like one of Pavlov's dogs, my heart palpitated upon hearing that Apple startup sound. I'd close my eyes, visualizing a new email, jonesing for the serotonin bump. The dial-up internet screeched and scratched and hissed, those irksome noises. As he started to express deeper feelings for me, my stomach churned. Repressing the gurgles, I stayed on track. I didn't want to lose this, an actual connection with weight, with promise. Even around my friends, my panic fluttered. I could not speak to my parents about my emotions, not the truest ones, at least. Lost in the desert, the barren landscape abundant with life, I just couldn't see it. It felt like he was all I had. He lived an hour or so outside of Toronto. He wrote that he would be coming to Halifax. The drive from Toronto to Halifax is 2 days. I had done it many times with my mother to visit my aunts. A small red cooler always sat at my feet on the floor of my mother's red VW Golf, full of snacks and Pepsi. My tiny legs hovered above. I'd crack one open, salivating at the click, hiss. Gulping and digging into a bag of ketchup chips, I would stare out of the window and count the passing cows. I especially love the Guernseys. I could spot them by their tan color, their reddish-brown blotches. I would make my poor mother listen to the Lion King soundtrack on loop. How many times she was forced to listen to Hakuna Matata, I don't know. Me waving my greasy ketchup chip-stained hands in the air, belting it out. We would spend the night near the Quebec and New Brunswick border. I loved listening to her speak French. Staring at the glowing computer, I read his words ad nauseum, hoping they would change. My body solid, skin tight, bricks on the chest. I began to perspire, dampness on the neck. Despite sweating, I shook, cold but burning, ears ringing. My first panic attack in retrospect. I did my best to dodge, intuiting that a clear no would not suffice, that something had changed. Ultimately, I managed to get him not to come and began the process of extracting myself. Responding less, disappearing for long periods. I could breathe. It seemed like that episode of Degrassi had ended. Not long after I moved to Toronto, he resurfaced, having known my plan to move there in the fall. The emails amped up. He would attach pictures of me with my eyes closed and Photoshop himself with massive angel wings above me, glaring down. They must have been stills he took on his television. They were not images I could remember. I'm going to come on you in the clouds of heaven, he wrote. He'd send me links to missing children websites. By then I was 16 years old, and worst of all, Creed lyrics. Above all the others will fly. This brings tears to my eyes, my sacrifice. He made it increasingly clear that he wasn't going to let anything or anyone get in his way. Webkey was the first person I told about him. The emails had reached a sizzling point, the oil leaping from the pan. You should really eat. You need to eat, Webkey said with a look of concern I appreciated. That can't go inside of you. That malicious voice again. I know, Webkey, I'm not sure I can. That can't go inside of you, insisting. My stomach felt like a dirty old cloth getting wrung out over the sink, hands choking it bit by bit. I tried to eat a bite of the pizza. No matter how much I chomped and gnawed, swallowing was out of the question. That can't go inside of you. Again, that sardonic inflection. The flavor had altered, my taste buds spoiled. Leaning over, elbow on the table, hand on forehead, I drank some water. It isn't as if I had no food thoughts before. They had started to pop up when puberty launched. I was filling out, growing breasts, all my discomfort hidden as boys and girls disentangled. Watching myself on screen had not been a problem for me really, but as my body morphed, that changed. The more visible I became, the more I waned. My pizza was still untouched. We headed home. I couldn't shake the events that had happened earlier that day. Ellen, Webkey yelled. I was sitting in my room doing homework. I loved that room. It was small, just enough space for a bed and a little dresser. The room had been painted close to canary yellow, my cat power and my peaches posters tacked up. It had one big window. At night, I would awake to eyes glowing, peering in, the raccoons examining me. There was a whole family in the attic at some point. Over 100,000 raccoons live in Toronto. It's been called the raccoon capital of the world. The population began to skyrocket when Toronto introduced the Green Bin, a municipal compost program in 2002. Feasts upon feasts. Yeah? I took a right out of my room and entered her office. The original hardwood floors creaked under the feet. The house already 80 years old at that point. She swiveled in her chair to look at me, pale, an email open on the monitor. Hi. I'm a good friend of Ellen's, and I'd really love to surprise her in Toronto. I haven't seen her yet since she moved, ... A friend then called, telling me she got the same email and thought it suspect. Another pal forwarded his email. He was homing in. He had virtually all of my contacts. I'd been working since I was 10, having filmed in places as close as Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and as far as Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Berlin, and Lisbon. I could easily imagine a friend in Halifax thinking it was a pal of mine in Ontario. I raced to email everyone I knew, attaching an image of him. He had sent it not long before, a selfie as they are now known. His face filled the screen. Eyes disturbed, he leered at me. Webke called the police. I was relieved when a woman arrived at the door. The officer walked in the house, head rotating, eyes searching every corner, a glance up the stairs. She said hardly anything initially. I imagined her in cop school, being taught how to enter a place. The body language stiff and solid and intentional. The tone flat. The face expressionless. Barely any eye contact at first. She combed the surroundings, assessing the danger. We showed her the emails, the photos, the links, and the lyrics, all of it. She was alarmed. I found myself looking out of the window, imagining him suddenly across the street. A quick cut. The jump scare. They phoned my father to explain the situation. It was a relief to have him known, for my parents to know. I was exhausted from the ceaseless state of disquietude. I took the phone, pressing it to my ear, my heart rate finally beginning to slow. "I'm going to come to Toronto and kick your ass," was the very first thing he said to me. He was furious, livid at what I had done, befriending an older man online when I was a kid. I went numb after that, his angry face fading away, but I will never forget those words. "I'm going to come to Toronto and kick your ass." All the emails from my stalker paling in comparison. When the police later went to the stalker's house, he simply asked, "Does this mean I get to see Ellen in court?" Their presence didn't faze him. If anything, it titillated him more. Between that comment, the emails, and his collection of photographs and other material pertaining to me, I was able to get a restraining order. Every day I'd wait on Ossington Avenue just north of Queen West to catch the 63A to go to school, about a 30-minute ride. I went to Vaughan Road Academy, where they had a program called Interact. It was one of the main reasons I moved to Toronto. If you are involved in dance, theater, music, or athletics, we offer you our unique integrated program with timetables that are built around your auditions, rehearsals, performances, and competitions. This is the only program in Ontario that offers you this type of flexibility. Our focus is to provide you an education that works with your outside interests. Flashes of him taunted me, coming up from behind with a knife, stabbing my back, stepping onto the bus, charging at me, blade penetrating my chest. Waiting when I got off the bus, that last short walk to school, a bullet to the head. I had to bring his picture to school, handing copies out to my teachers, who presented the photo to the rest of the class in a morbid show and tell. I was filming the television show Regenesis at the time with Mark, who had first told me about Interact. We'd met a year before and became inseparable. When leaving set for the day, the driver would take an obscure route, making sure no one followed. Still, it would be easy to find out where the studio was located. Again, pictures were shown at work. I couldn't stop visualizing him ending my life. Shortly after, I was walking east down Queen Street, west toward Yonge Street, where I could catch Line 1 at Queen Station, across from the Eden Centre, Toronto's largest mall. I take the 9-stop journey north up to Mark's house, exiting at Eglinton Station. I was on the north side of the street, across from what was the Much Music building. For my non-Canadian readers, Much Music launched in 1984 and was essentially the Canadian MTV. I felt a hand on my right shoulder. It stroked down to my elbow. "You look familiar." I turned and saw his face. He stood in front of me, casual, a hint of a smile. I pictured a knife entering me, shimmering in the sun each time he pulled it out to stab again, a sacrifice. He made it clear on multiple occasions that no one was going to get in the way of us, our connection, our love. Not my father, not the police. "Come with me and let's talk." I noticed the little white dog at his feet. This seemed unusual. He lived almost an hour from the city. I could not move. I could not speak. "You're going to die now," I thought. "This is it. Come on, just come with me. We can go talk," he said, trying to persuade me with a gentle tone. An intoxicating smell of refined sugar wafted out of Cafe Crepe's takeout window, a sweet buckwheat treat. The iconic cafe with its giant red neon sign was locked in my peripheral vision. Never had I felt that frozen. And Chino Man waiting to be found. My chest unlocked, rise and fall. My lungs returned to their function. "You can't be here." All I managed to get out, a recording skipping. "You can't be here, you can't be here, you can't be here." People swiped by, flashes behind him, one of the busiest stretches of Toronto. I tried to pull out my focus, dolly back. I raised my voice. "You can't be here, you can't be there." Nobody looked. "Just come with me. We can go for a walk." He took a small step, gesturing toward me. "Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me," I shouted, bidding on, "Don't hurt me," to attract pedestrians' attention. Stepping back, I put my hands up. "Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me." Passerbys craned their necks. No one interfered, but it was sufficient, causing him to retreat. He took off, the little dog marching at his feet. I fled, running. I wove in and out, zigzagging through streets. In retrospect, a fruitless endeavor, assuming he had discovered my address. I called my father the moment I got home. At first, he didn't believe me. The police were notified. The man was arrested, having not complied with the restraining order. I didn't press charges. It turned out he had undiagnosed schizophrenia. We came to a settlement of sorts. He would live with his father and began mental health treatment. He would not come near me or contact me in any shape or form, which he has not. It all ended rather abruptly, and if there is a tiny morsel of goodness in all of this, it's that he was finally seen. He could now receive support for his pain. Perhaps that was all he was asking for. I hope he got the help he needed. I hope he never did this again. I managed to forgive him, but it wasn't easy. There was a lot at play when I would abuse my body, having done it since I was a small child. This event hurled it all forward, as if I was running through an unconscious checklist. 1. People cut themselves. I'll try that. 2. People get wasted. I'll try that. 3. People stop eating. I'll try that. 4. People repress. I'll try that. I would take a small knife to my room, placing the quip on my upper arm, close to the shoulder, pressing down, dragging it slightly, enough to see that red, enough for that relief. That did not last long. I got wasted one night by myself in Toronto. This is something people do to help. My brain divulged. I drank vodka straight from a juice glass at the small blue chrome dining table in the kitchen, sipping, then tipping the bottle for more. Poor Webkey came home to a wasted, emo teenager. Broken social scenes, anthems for a 17-year-old girl on repeat. Used to be one of the wretched ones, and I liked you for that. Now you're all gone, got your makeup on, and you're not coming back. Can't you come back? Number 3 is what stuck. It seemed to be the solution. Food restricting my new norm. This all coincided with puberty. my body continuing to develop, but not like Mark's. Reality settled in. I could never see myself in the mirror. I'd forever feel this disgust, and I'd punish my body for it. Research has shown that transgender and gender nonconforming youth are 4 times more likely to struggle with an eating disorder. My brain became consumed by counting calories, time passing, how to make myself full without making myself full, when to make the clear herbal tea that satiated my gut just enough, endless gum chewing, avoiding. I'd measure my all bran in the morning, the soy milk too. Dismissing Webke's concerns, I'd bring a protein bar to school for lunch and allow myself to eat only half of it. At least the flashes of him had dissipated. At least walking down the street, I could stress about bread instead of the residual terror. A knife in the back, putting my fear in a sandwich so I could control it, so I could forget it. It is not as easy to forgive my father. I'm going to come to Toronto and kick your ass. When his kid needed safety, when his kid needed love, when his kid needed protection, he threatened violence, outraged because I had the audacity to communicate with an older man on the internet when I was a minor. If I didn't deserve care in that moment, if I didn't deserve safety and love, when would I ever? That sentence had lived in my body much longer than the man's threats, his obsession, his fingers fondling my arm. Whew, that was a lot. I need a little breather after that chapter. I was not expecting that. Man. I'll be back. Chapter 7. Leeches. I learned early on I could not have my parents at work with me. Sitting on a small wooden swing, I was filming a scene of Pit Pony in the front yard of the MacLean family home in Cape Breton. I was acting with Sean Smith, an astute actor, understated and nuanced. We swayed gently as his character consoled mine, his hands dirty from coal. I liked him. He was handsome, slightly gruff but kind. Working with kids can be a lot, and I appreciated his generosity and patience. My father was in my periphery. My focus went from the moment in the scene to my dad with his 1970s Nikon taking black and white photographs. I clamped shut, that freezing again. Whatever that thing was I could supposedly do. Create an honest emotion with an expressiveness that the adults said translated to the screen. Abruptly stopped when I felt his presence. A similar sensation occurred when my mom would watch. This was around when I was arriving at the age where being a tomboy was no longer a cute look. The lurking pressure to change was omnipresent, a constant state of disapproval. I imagined she may have prayed for me to not be gay. I needed some space. At 11, I had asked them to hide if I was shooting, but that wasn't enough. No longer could I release myself to the emotion, that sensation, the rush that I loved. It had stopped. Eventually, I suggested they not come at all. They did not take it personally, even though I was unable to articulate the weight of it all. It shocked me that I had asked for what I needed, despite being afraid, and that someone had listened. Perhaps they were relieved. They both worked full-time, and often it wasn't even possible for them to show up. For the second season of Pit Pony, the Horse Wranglers, Lee and Jerry, and their 16-year-old daughter Fallon were my chapter 1 chaperones. They were kind and let me live with them. They had a house that was close to the soundstage and a ranch about a 20-minute drive from Sydney in Leeches Creek. We would swim in the river on their property, and I would practice flipping my wet hair to the right like the other boys did when they emerged from the water. We would pick leeches from our bodies, just grabbing and yanking, unbothered. It made me feel like the young guys in Stand By Me, except they were terrified of the leeches and I was not. It made me feel brave. Did that up my chances to achieve my dream, to look like River Phoenix in a white t-shirt? Despite playing and having to dress like a girl in 1904 while working, these times let me be closer to the boy I was. I was somewhere new with adults, people who had not known me before. I was making friends, real ones, the kind who encouraged my feelings, championing that little guy, letting him breathe. I had an opportunity to exist as myself, starting from scratch, the cool loner on the ranch. This freedom on and off set transferred to the work. I loosened up. I was happy. My parents almost never came to work with me ever again. If they did, it was just a visit, but I would not allow them to come to set. This increased my vulnerability in ways, I'm sure, but having witnessed some of the worst stage parents you could imagine, I'm glad I experienced the other version. I've watched adults slowly chip away at their children, their overprotection, a form of neglect. If they were a character in a screenplay, the first note would be too much. But they weren't actually watching. They weren't really listening. All the value wrapped up in work and image and followers. The opposite of what acting should be. A disintegration of ego. Not the stroking of one. It ends careers. Even though I preferred my path, my lack of healthy boundaries still did not bode well. As puberty transmuted me into a character I had no interest in playing, my isolation, insecurity, and unknowing grew. I desperately needed to anchor myself in new cities with no friends, alone in hotel rooms. It was not hard for someone to pray. I'm sure they sensed that, like the man I met online. A lonely kid is a perfect target. There was the director who groomed me when I was a teenager. His frequent texts made me feel special, as did the books he gifted me. He took me to dinner at Swan on Queen West. Stroking my thigh under the table, he whispered, "You have to make the move. I can't." On a project not long before, a crew member had done the same. In between takes, he would talk to me about art and films. Kubrick, naturally. He invited me to hang out on a Saturday afternoon. After a walk in the rain, he grabbed me, asserting we go upstairs, pulling me to his body. I could feel his hard cock against me. Just before I turned 18, I filmed my first movie in Los Angeles. I hadn't made a film in America before, and it was the first time I'd been to LA. I stayed at the Oakwood Apartments in Burbank, tucked into a hill right off Barham Boulevard, famous for all the child stars who have passed through. Neil Patrick Harris, Kirsten Dunst, Jennifer Love Hewitt. The property was always teeming with stage parents. Hard Candy begins with a successful photographer named Jeff, played by the illustrious Patrick Wilson, chatting with a 14-year-old girl online. The plot hard to believe considering what had just transpired with my stalker. The banter is flirty, youthful. They meet up. He takes her home in his Mini. We are concerned for Haley. They are drinking. Jeff wants to take photos. His tone shifts to frustration, aggression peeking through. However, the tables turn. A spiked screwdriver brings him to the floor and he wakes up tied to a chair. Haley believes he is involved in the kidnapping and murder of a girl her age. It makes it clear to him that if he doesn't confess, she will castrate him. A shockingly simple surgery that she has taught herself to do as an honor student. She freezes his dick with the giant bag of ice. Jeff is in agony, hands turning blue, pleading desperately, swearing he had no involvement. He screams, but it's useless. Haley performs the procedure and dumps his testicles down the kitchen sink. Jeff can hear the garbage disposal masticating his balls. Ultimately, she doesn't really perform the surgery, but Jeff does admit to being involved. "I just took pictures," he said. Just a pedophile. We shot the film, almost all of it, in a small studio close by the Oakwood Apartments. Burbank, often considered the media capital of the world, is home to Walt Disney Studios, Warner Brothers, Nickelodeon Animation Studio, and a massive porn industry. The majority of Hard Candy was filmed on a set. The interior of Jeff's house was sleek, minimal, that mid-century cool. The ever-hip, professional, mini-driving, sensitive guy. The friend who could never. There was a man working on the film who always carried a small book of crosswords, the most formidable ones, I was told. He has since gone on to make films of his own. He was funny and strange, and he was kind to me. We spoke about books, discussed films, and obscure, depressing graphic novels. A glint in his eyes made me feel seen, supported. He had a sweetness even. We made the film in 18.5 days, an all-consuming, emotional sprint. I was giddy with exhaustion by the end. The Hard Candy wrap party was held in downtown Los Angeles, an elevator ride up a tall building. There was a rare camaraderie among all of us, what you hope for when creating something. We drank and danced and had tearful goodbyes. My crossword puzzle friend gave me a ride back to the Oakwood Apartments. We drove through the cluster of downtown skyscrapers that towered over us ominously. It was very late, and I laid my head against the window as we got on the 101. I loved the glow of the freeways at night. Pulling up to the Oakwood, I watched him type in the security code, and the gate opened slowly. He walked me to the apartment, followed me in. He stood noticeably close, his body brushing my behind. His voice sweet, his hands on my shoulders, he guided me to the bedroom. I went stiff with a smile, unsure what to do as he stood tall and removed his glasses. He laid me down on the bed, starting to remove my pants. He said, "I want to eat you out." I froze. After it was over, he tried to stay in the bed with me. I had thawed marginally and told him he couldn't, to get out. He slept on the couch. Turning 18 further frayed my boundaries, an unspoken permission slip I didn't consent to. At the start of a project, a crew member offered to take me apartment hunting on the weekend. It was a nice gesture, but something felt odd. It was far beyond a typical action for someone in her job position. I'd been staying in a hotel up until the point and needed out. A proper fridge at least, so I said yes. She picked me up in her black Audi. We arrived at the first building, a new development. We met someone in the lobby who took us to the elevator to the top floor. She asked for the person to let us go in our own to look around the barely furnished apartment. They waited in the hall as we went in. It was a 2-bedroom, which was unnecessary, accentuating my loneliness. The apartment was eerily sparse and echoey as we walked through. There wasn't a whole lot to look at, making it feel even more pointless. I was standing in the empty living room in front of the couch when I felt her grab me. She pressed her face into mine, some version of kissing. That freezing coming over me again. The next thing I knew, I was on the rug, the floor firm on my back. I didn't say no. I did not resist. I just stiffened. Lying on the carpet, I didn't make a sound. She began to dry hump me, at first slow, then faster and faster. Her body on top of me, the weight grinding my spine into the floor. Her eyes were closed. Head turned away from me, face perspiring. She huffed and puffed and began to moan. I didn't move. I just stared up at the ceiling and then closed my eyes. She looked up again as she came. It was only the second time I had kissed a woman and the first time I had ever seen one come in person. This dynamic continued. She'd pick me up at my apartment, take me to hers, where a version of the same situation would play out. Me in bed, motionless, frozen, she on top of me, touching me, going inside of me. My rigidness would upset her, my numbness taking over, unable to touch her. We'd get back in the Aldi, and she'd drop me off at the sterile, one-bedroom apartment I ended up renting. She'd fuck me at work in my trailer, I'd sit on her lap, and not know why. I was back in the same city 2 years later to make another film. Memories of her still lingered. The heavy breathing and the sweating above me, the arching of her back when she came. More than halfway into the shoot, I arrived at work at the crack of dawn. As I was walking to my trailer, I noticed a black Audi, and my heart stopped. It can't be, I thought, but I knew it was. Darren is out for the day, so someone else is filling in, another person on set mentioned. I ducked into my trailer and tried to calm my breathing. There was a knock on my door. I opened it, and there she was, standing there, looking up and smiling. "Hi, can I come in?" she asked. I let her in. "It's nice to see you. We had fun, right?" "What?" I thought, nothing actually coming out. "We had fun, right? We just listened to music and had fun, right?" Her eyes were wide. Her smile almost concealed it, but I could see the fright seeping through. "Yeah," I responded. Chapter 8. Famous Asshole at Party. I stayed at a friend's place in the hills for a few weeks when I was 27. Someone had been visiting my house in the night, laying roses along the gate. They were leaving notes. They were leaving notes with quotes from some of my favorite writers and musicians, but offered no indication of their own identity. Cryptic messages with unknown intent, something I was familiar with. I decided to leave my house briefly while I had security cameras installed. The home was situated at the very top of the hill, overlooking the city. At night, a sea of lights sprawled below me. I could sit there for hours, transfixed, the glinting and dancing, the red lights of blood current in the veins of LA. I had not left the house much. My friend was away working, and I was still mending from heartbreak. I had to force myself to do something. I drove a short distance west to celebrate a good pal's birthday. I arrived at the house party, taking in the unique layout. The extreme high ceilings felt church-like, with a loft where the kitchen and dining area looked down at the vast living room. It was old, perhaps built in the 1940s, a dollhouse occupied by a very hip person. Off the living room, there was a large wooden terrace with built-in benches that overlooked a family of trees and a neighbor's home. This particular friend is a social butterfly, adorned by many. So the party was popping, surging with energy. People milked it for every last drop before the inevitable arrival of the cops demanding quiet. It was 2014, and I had come out as gay only 2 months before at a human rights campaign conference in Vegas called Time to Thrive, the inaugural event focusing on LGBTQ+ youth. I flew the morning of Valentine's Day to Vegas with my manager. Boarding the flight at Burbank Airport, my anxiety was at a different level. I barely spoke, staring ahead at nothing. On the flight, I obsessively read the speech, as if I could exhaust the emotion, mutating it into that old takeout menu in your kitchen drawer you glance out at arbitrarily for no reason. When we arrived at the hotel, all I could do was cradle myself in the hotel bed. No television, no looking at my phone. I just wrapped my arms around my body. Time like sludge, barely budging. As I waited backstage, I squeezed my hands together, eyes down, desperate to not have a panic attack. What if I just collapse on stage? I didn't collapse. I managed to make it through the speech without being overcome by emotion, by the catharsis. I floated after a lightness, a shock to the system. I did it. It wasn't until I got in the car to head to the airport that I completely broke down. Sobs of relief, letting it out. A weight lifted from my shoulders that I once believed would live there forever. One of the most important and healing moments in my life. Not all the way there yet, but getting closer. My friend's birthday party was in full swing, and I tried to channel the same lightness I'd felt only a few weeks back. I sat outside on one of the benches on the patio, nursing a tequila soda. I caught up with friends and acquaintances I had not seen in ages, even met some new people. I was enjoying myself. An acquaintance of mine arrived, already quite inebriated. He walked out onto the terrace. I said hello. We sometimes saw each other at the gym. His energy was different tonight, harsh. He began by insulting my personality, which was okay, go for it. But then it moved into another territory. I see what you're doing, I'm not stupid. I see what you're doing. He stood too close, staring down at me where I sat. What am I doing? I answered flatly, more confused than anything. At his aggression, his malevolent smile. Oh please, it's obvious what you're doing. The attention. I was familiar with this tone, this body language, threatening but casual, flaunting his power, but it took me a moment to process what he might be alluding to. Is this about me being gay? Spurred, somehow provoked, he sat on the bench next to me and started to lay in. That doesn't exist. You aren't gay. You're just afraid of men, he said it ruthlessly. Loud but with a smile, gloating. Responding was useless. It was making it worse. He just kept going. People kept telling him to stop, but he didn't, and they gave up. I stood up and crossed to the other side of the terrace, trying to remove myself from the situation. He followed, sitting next to me again, his body close. You're just afraid of men. Men are predators, and you're just afraid of them. He spoke to me as if no opinion mattered but his own. A stroke of wisdom to bestow upon me. Wasted slurs of words vomited out of his body as my body compacted, elbows on alert. I told him to stop harassing me, to fuck off, that he was being extremely offensive. I got up again and went inside. He pursued behind. I sat down on a small sofa, and he did too. People danced to the Spring Breakers soundtrack, breaking it down to scary monsters and nice sprites. Look at this. I'm a coward too. You don't need to hide, my friend, for I'm just like you. I'm going to fuck you and make you realize you aren't gay. I'm going to lick your asshole. It is going to taste like lime. You're not gay, he slurred. He kept describing how he was going to fuck me, touch me, lick me, how he liked to pity fuck women. I don't know why I didn't demand he leave, ask for people to do more than, yo, leave her alone. Some of my closest friends were there witnessing it. Power works in funny ways. He was, and still is, one of the most famous actors in the world. I got up and walked to the bathroom, nervous. He was following me. I closed the door and locked it. I sat down on the toilet and looked out the windows at the trees. Looked out the window at the trees, the light from the terrace just barely reaching them. I wondered if anyone could see in, which reinforced a certain aloneness. I stayed on the toilet longer than I needed to, washed my hands, and then left the party. The incident went on for so long that so many people saw and heard that the following day a friend of mine who wasn't at the party got a text from another friend who wasn't at the party saying, I heard he was horrible to Ellen last night. A few days later, I was upstairs at the gym on the treadmill. I was watching the news as I ran by myself when I heard his voice. I'm not sure how he knew I was upstairs, but he came bounding up. People were saying I need to apologize to you, but I don't remember anything. I'm not like that at all. I'm not prejudiced. I don't know why that happened. I'm sorry. I don't remember anything. I didn't stop running or slow down. You clearly have a problem with gay people. You were saying horrific things to me, and not that I care about the consequences that you would face, but you're just lucky no one filmed that, I responded. I really don't have a problem with gay people, I swear. My feet pounded. I think you might. He stood there stunned. He said sorry again and again. I've seen him a couple times since. He barely says hi, and neither do I. I sense spite from some people in the industry, a hostility even. that flash of aggression hidden in jokes, blamed on alcohol, the sexual harassment dismissed. I remember sitting in a former agent's office, thrilled that Vice wanted to make Gaycation. We'd be in Japan in just a couple months to film the first episode. When one of the major players of the agency walked in, I shared the news. "We get it, you're gay," he responded instantly. It's as if there's a need to trivialize such endeavors, unwilling to acknowledge experiences that are not their own, unwilling to listen, throwing around power but refusing to admit they have any. I wasn't able to stand up for myself then. I'd fold in, taking it, letting it rest inside. I was persuaded to reject a character not long before I came out as gay because it wouldn't be helpful. Subtext: people think you're a homo, and this will make them think you're definitely a homo, and you can't exist as who you are if you want to have a career. The same ongoing conversation, just a new situation for it. I got off that phone call with my agent and started to cry, the bucket full, on the verge of rushing out. I called my manager. I told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I couldn't hide, lie. It was eating me from the inside out. I said on stage in Vegas, "Beyond putting yourself in one box or another, you worry about the future, about college or work, or even your physical safety, trying to create the mental picture of your life, of what on earth is going to happen to you, can crush you a little bit every day. It is toxic and painful and deeply unfair. If we took just 5 minutes to recognize each other's beauty instead of attacking each other for our differences, that's not hard. It's really an easier and better way to live, and ultimately it saves lives. Then again, it's not easy at all. It can be the hardest thing because loving other people starts with loving ourselves and accepting ourselves." Coming out in 2014 was more a necessity than a decision, but yes, it was one of the most crucial things I had ever done for myself. No matter what came after, a different kind of exposure, vulnerability, it was all worth it. All a step. I'd rather feel pain while living than hiding. My shoulders open, my heart was bare. I could be in the world in ways that felt impossible before. Holding hands. But deep down an emptiness lurked, that undertone. Its whispers still ripe and in my ear. Chapter 9, Pink Dot. It's 2022, springtime. I had just had dinner with a friend and was headed back to my hotel in West Hollywood. Walking back, heading east along Sunset Boulevard, I texted Madison. A mutual friend had set us up about a month before. She is smart, compassionate, fun, and our sex was unbridled yet safe. Perhaps the most uninhibited sex I've had, this new body offering a grounding, a presence. Enjoying things I never thought I would, feeling queer than ever. How deeply freeing to have someone to love, fucking my dick and my pussy, and permitting myself to enjoy it. No longer frozen, that undercurrent, the wanting to flee. When Madison arrived, we immediately started to kiss, a physical chemistry that takes control, magnets sucking. I moved down her body to my knees, her hand resting on my head, ever so slightly pulling my hair. We had sex for hours and then slept deeply. I almost always wake up around 6. I snuck out of her room, trying not to wake her. I drank coffee and sat at my computer to write. I love the early morning, the quiet, a certain kind of healthy loneliness. A reminder? The hotel was on Sunset Boulevard. I planned to stay for 6 days to see friends I'd missed dearly during the height of the pandemic. Every hello and goodbye hit in a new way now. I'd flown in from New York City, having moved 3 years ago from LA, where I'd been for the previous 10 years. I lived various places. Hancock Park, Beechwood Canyon, Studio City, and lastly, in Nichols Canyon, not far from where I was staying. West Hollywood is known as an LGBTQ+ area of Los Angeles. Rows of queer bars run along Santa Monica Boulevard, mostly catering to cis white gay men. Rainbows line the streets. I wrote all morning. Madison joined me at the table at 9:30. Her sweatpants and vintage t-shirt made me hard. I have a thing for sweatpants. We both sat and did work. We spent time together well. There was a natural flow, lucid, not forced, and fine with silence. We wrote, then fucked, ate, then napped, and then I left the hotel for the first time at around 4 to go to the Pink Dot, a convenience store directly across the street on Sunset, known for its colorful pink and light blue exterior and the vintage VW Bug with pink dots and a propeller hat parked out front. While walking the short distance from the hotel exit to the southeast corner of Sunset and La Cienega, I passed a tall man who I briefly caught eyes with. He carried a slushie in one hand and a plastic bag in the other. As I neared the corner, the red light, cars hurtled down Sunset. He turned and started to move toward me. "Don't look at me, you fucking faggot. Faggot." He screamed this at me over and over. Every faggot got louder. No one near us on the sidewalk. He was about 3 feet away, standing over me. I froze. There was no room for me to tell him who I was. Tell him I was, in fact, not... Ugh. There was no room for me to tell him I was, in fact, not looking at him. He just kept yelling. I worried that if I turned to run, it would trigger a reaction, and the same if I had said something. So I just stood solid, looking forward, doing my best to seem unaffected. And in the moment because I was in shock, this seemed to work. He started to walk east a bit. I took out my phone and called Madison. Better not to text. You can keep your head up if you're on the phone. Shaken, I explained and asked if she could come over to Pink Dot. The call triggered him. As the light finally changed and I stepped off the curb, he turned back around. "Don't you fucking talk about me, faggot. I know you're talking about me. I'm going to beat you up, fag." He charged toward me from behind, yelling at me. Madison hearing all this through the phone. "I'm gonna fucking gay bash you, faggot." He started coming faster. This time I ran, trying to reach Pink Dot before he reached me. The jolt of panic, a flashback to being with Justin on the hill, or when another man in West Hollywood years before screamed, "I'm gonna beat you to the ground, you ugly fucking dyke. I'll kill you before the police get here." My friend Angela and I sped away in her car, or when I ran from a group of teenage girls who surrounded me at 18. "It isn't Halloween. Why are you dressed up as a lesbian?" one of them asked as they approached, threatening me. Or when Paula and I dodged a friend of a friend who came at us around a bonfire, wasted and enraged by our snuggling. "You don't have to shove it in our faces," he barked. Others had to intervene, fighting him off until he stumbled away. "This is why I need a gun," the man yelled right behind me as I frantically swung open the door to Pink Dot. "Please help, this guy is screaming at me, calling me a faggot and saying he's going to bash me." The words flew out of my mouth as I swung my head over my shoulder and back. I was out of breath. My voice trembled, but I tried to suppress it. The man stood right outside the entrance. 2 people were working behind the desk. One of them jetted toward the door, yelling at the man to get away, locking it as the pursuer lingered, but then walked off. The woman at the counter asked if I needed water. She encouraged me to breathe. "We don't put up with that here," she said. "Are you okay? You sure I can't get you anything?" I said I was fine, but thanked them, taking her advice to breathe, to calm my nerves. I've learned to compartmentalize these moments for the most part, shut down, shrug my shoulders, let it run off my back like the beer I had thrown on me while walking down Queen West in Toronto less than 6 months before, while filming the 3rd season of The Umbrella Academy. Another queer-friendly neighborhood. My friend Genesis and I passed a man who proceeded to turn around and throw his beer at the backs of our heads. "Faggots! Faggots!" he said as he walked away. The S slithered like a poison down the throat. That time I pivoted, a reflex, boiling rage from all the times I hadn't turned around. "Did you just call me a fucking faggot? Fuck you!" I yelled repeatedly as a few people standing on the sidewalk watched. Genesis pleaded for me to calm down. He walked off. I think about that moment a lot. The anger that man felt entitled to display and my response to it. In our society, anger and masculinity are so intertwined. I hope to redefine that in my own life. I forgot I had hung up on Madison. When I frantically swung open the door to Pink Dot, I could see her on the other side of the street, already on the way over. The man was nowhere in sight, so I expressed my gratitude for the help and walked to the sidewalk to meet her, my neck twisting from side to side. I made sure to keep looking as well as we walked the short distance back to the hotel room. She put her arm around me as I recounted what had happened, the touch different from before. Chapter 10. That Little Indie. I didn't get my first tattoo until I was 30, but the meaning stretched back to one of my early experiences as an actor. The tattoo reads, C. Keynes, and it's located on my upper right arm, just below the shoulder. C. Keynes is my nickname for one of my dearest friends, Catherine Keener. I met her during a pivotal time, post-Hard Candy, pre-Juno. I was busy, but not very known. Groundless in Los Angeles, sprawled and unfamiliar, I was researching for my next role, up all night digesting the horrors, hoping my acting partner and I would get along, that we would trust each other. I was finding it hard to separate myself from my roles, and this role was particularly distressing. My initial meeting with Catherine was at her home in Santa Monica, just a few minutes walk from the beach. At 19, I had just signed on to star in An American Crime with her. Tommy O'Haver, the writer and director, picked me up from a hotel in Hollywood on Highland Boulevard. We drove the 40 minutes west to her home so Catherine and I could spend time there together, talk the film, the characters, but mostly connect with each other. These weren't easy roles. The house was an old dark brown craftsman. It had an unusually large backyard, the kind you do not expect in Santa Monica. A small tree house, a swing dangling below. Tall hedges stretched above the surrounding fence. It felt like its own little world. The fact that I had been cast opposite such an icon was utterly surreal for me. I'd be making a film with one of my favorite actors of all time. Stepping through her back gate, I was unbearably shy. I barely spoke. I had attempted to look cool, vintage tee, black jacket, torn up Converse. She walked toward us with a giant smile and that familiar voice. Wearing ripped jeans and a baggy white t-shirt, she oozed a warmth and sincerity. She was direct, with characteristic, sensual swagger. We climbed over her deck balcony and continued on our way up to the roof. Our sense of humor aligned, and her unmistakable laugh came pouring out. Staring out toward the Pacific, we spoke of what was ahead. No condensation, that dismissive cadence slung at you when you're young. Instead, an unspoken ease. I'd never met anyone like her before. I went from shy to present. I could already feel her care, her desire to protect, but with zero preciousness. We became pals quickly, but our closeness could only do so much to mitigate the effect filming had on my 19-year-old self. An American Crime was based on a true story about a 16-year-old girl, Sylvia Likens, who in 1965 suffered the most amount of abuse on a single victim in Indiana state history. The film is brutal, but it holds back. The real story was even worse. I had been cast as Sylvia. Sylvia's parents were carnival workers, and when they traveled, they left two of their daughters with Gertrude Brzezinski. Keener played Gertrude. a single mother of 7, struggling with poverty, barely earning a living by doing laundry for her Indianapolis neighbors. Gertrude almost never ate, her face gaunt, angular, and sharp, and body as thin as a rake. She self-medicated with downers, swigs from tiny bottles. Mood swings fluctuated from one extreme to the other. Sylvia's parents leave Sylvia and their young daughter Jenny with Gertrude and her swaths of kids for $20 a week. When the first of the money is late, Gertrude takes it out on Sylvia and Jenny. Leading them down to the basement, she demands they bend over and aggressively flogs them. The abuse escalates, Gertrude encouraging her children to join in as well. In one of the most horrifying scenes to film, Gertrude forces Sylvia to stick a Coke bottle up her vagina in front of the other children. We did not actually do this in front of the young actors. They only came to set for their coverage. Off camera, we pretended Gertrude only twisted Sylvia's arm. The Coke bottle scene culminates in her being dragged toward the basement steps. Screaming and crying, she is hurled down the stairs, smashing her head on the cement floor. Sylvia is left with serious blunt force trauma. There were scenes in my previous films that had been difficult to shoot, violent, sexual, and physical, but this was different. Moments in this film were unspeakably brutal. As a teenager, I did not have the skills to turn it on and off as abruptly and easily as I can now. To leave the work at work, the scenes would linger, feeling stuck. It took longer to dislodge from the body. During Sylvia's last moments alive, she was branded. Gertrude straddled her while one of the kids held Sylvia's hands above her head. Someone passed out in the theater during the scene when the film premiered at Sundance in 2007. I don't blame them. Sylvia died not long after that, torment-ridden in her flesh. Sylvia's body faded away until it broke. Knowing that the story was true made it all worse. The details even more gut-churning. I couldn't escape Sylvia, and the days came home with me. If I was alone in my apartment, I would pace, walk, then sit, up again, pace. Look out the window, pivot to the bathroom, windowsill again, sit and smoke. Cigarette done, grab the backpack and get out. My incessant underlying need to flee, my new normal. Stopping is too risky. That's when the feelings jump out. Playing a character that was partially starved to death allowed me to lean into my desire to disappear, to punish myself. It's for a film, I'd say, in response to mention of my small bites, the annoying concerned tone, almost a challenge. I'll prove to you all that I need nothing, the little voice would brag with the creak of a side smile. In agony, Sylvia would scratch the concrete floor until the tips of her fingers wore off. She chewed her lip compulsively, biting through the pain, and when they found her body, it looked as though she had 2 mouths. I'm hungry. 2 more hours, then you can eat. What am I gonna eat? Steamed vegetables and brown rice, half of it. How much more time? 1 hour and 45 minutes. I'd shower at night, washing off the burns, the bruises, a reminder that I had nothing to complain about. How dare I acknowledge my silly pain as anywhere near hers? I listened to Downtown by Petula Clark incessantly. It was one of the most popular songs in 1965, the year Sylvia was murdered. And you may find someone kind to help and understand you, someone who is just like you and needs a gentle hand. Walking, I would listen. On the bus down Sunset, I would listen. In the house, sitting on the windowsill, smoking a cigarette, I would listen. It was compulsive, a way I tend to be with the songs, some for stranger reasons than others. I would walk down the hill to Sunset Boulevard, catching the bus west to Hollywood. I'd get off around Vine and wander into Amoeba Music, a warehouse-sized, new and used record, CD, and DVD store in Los Angeles. The tack, tack, tack of potential buyers flipping through the hard plastic cases filled the ears as much as the latest, hippest songs they played, a metronome setting the speed. It helped the time pass. Characters affected me in various ways. How could they not? It's an exploration of another human's experience. A never-ending exercise in empathy, opening the heart, hoping it all sinks in, waiting for that release of emotion. My eyes would close, and it would strike me, an inconceivable depth of despair. I wonder how she even made it as long as she did, how she didn't just give up. I guess that is what torture is, dragging you to the end and pulling you back again and again. I was staying in Silver Lake in the top floor of a 2-story house that had been converted into its own apartment. A 1-bedroom with large windows that offered a beautiful view of the city. It was tucked into the hill on Lucille, not far from the Sunset Boulevard, but isolated, a substantial, steep climb. I was alone. I had next to no friends in Los Angeles at the time. I remember Keener scooping me up in her black sedan and taking me to a July 4th barbecue in the backyard of a house formerly owned by Buster Keaton. I think she wanted to help me, sensing a struggle I could not speak to. We sat down across from her friend, Karen O., who I idolized. Show Your Bones, a quintessential record for me at the time, but food was stressful. Drinking was stressful. My eyeballs darted around, calculations in my brain that refused me the moment. I was lightly seeing a guy at the time. We would go to dinner, and I would just stare at the menu, dazed. I wanted none of it. We sat in a restaurant in a train car that served only pasta. Without ordering, we left, and he drove me home. I've already dealt with my issues, he said before pulling away. I think I'm gay, I said, once we were fucking. I think I'm gay, I said once while we were fucking. Closed off, dissociated, not even performative. No, you're not, he responded, continuing with the pumps. I was barely eating, barely sleeping, delirious on set. I smoked compulsively, hoping to blow out all the thoughts. Or as Kurt Vonnegut puts it, the public health authorities never mention the main reason why many Americans have for smoking heavily, which is that smoking is a fairly honorable form of suicide. The shoot became increasingly difficult. I'd crash at Keener's sometimes, especially after the more horrifying days. I felt taken care of there. We'd drink tequila and sit around her fire pit. We would blare music and dance, dance, dance. A wide expanse of unknown adventures ahead. We met making a film wherein she murders me. In the real world, she was the only thing saving me. By the end of the shoot, I had lost a significant amount of weight, and it continued to plummet when I returned to Halifax, where I was still living on and off. I dropped to 84 pounds. My arms were so skinny I could take the outer sleeve of a to-go coffee cup, stick my hand through, and slide it up my arm, beyond my elbow and to my shoulder, wasting away. Later that year, I dressed up as a coffee cup sleeve for Halloween. Warning, hot beverage inside, spelled out with a thick black marker. No matter the words or looks of concern or how many rich pastries people tried to get me to eat, I could not see it. I refused to. Hurting my body to that extreme must have been a cry for help. But when the help would come, it made me angry and resentful. Where have you been? An unfair question, really. I had never communicated what I'd been grappling with to anyone. When I first returned home, my mother's face was filled with panic. The worry in her eyes shattered me, a look of anguish I had not seen before, and the culprit was me. I had crossed the threshold, my weight so low the emaciation had become visible. The sunken cheeks scared me. My need to fix her, to protect her, forced my eating issue in an alternate direction. Now I did want to eat. I was desperate to. I didn't want her to feel that way. Finally motivated to eat, I couldn't. I'd prepare to take a bite of a sandwich, something simple, nothing fancy. My throat would clench, the back of my neck would grow moist, my chest swelling with deep dread. Spilling into a full panic attack, I could not swallow the food. Having been obsessed with maintaining control, I'd now lost it. Squeezed far too tight, my body, understandably, was done with me. That will not go in. That will not go in. That will not go in. My days revolved around the moments I was supposed to get food down. There was no hiding it now, my face cadaverous, body, skin, and bones. I could not escape the stress, the concern omnipresent, and I could not shake Sylvia. I thought of her all the time. No role had stuck with me like that. Flushes of the basement, the hunger, forced to eat her own vomit, screams ignored. How about you try putting cheese sauce on your broccoli? A well-meaning therapist suggested. I sat in her office near the Dalhousie University campus, a white room. Credentials framed, she had long, wavy, light hair and wore glasses. She had a smile that was stuck on her face. Nuts are a great snack to have around. The conversation revolved around when and what I should eat for breakfast, when and what I should eat for a snack, outlines of what should be on my supper plate. I wasn't supposed to exercise. No push-ups or anything of the sort, nothing beyond food, and it was all beyond food. I avoided the few friends I had in Halifax. I was ashamed. The actress goes off and returns like all the others. I was such a goddamn cliche. Social anxiety was already a prevalent aspect of my life, and as my mental health suffered, my isolation intensified. Just a text to a friend seemed out of reach. The idea of making a plan unfeasible. Loneliness had always been a staple for me, an inherent disconnect from my surroundings, a foundational dissociation. Lured away from my existence, I thought those around me wanted me to disappear, that I was preferred as an illusion. I was unable to work for a while. The therapist suggested the break, as did my parents. Acting was the last thing I wanted to do anyhow, too fragile and erratic. Loud noises made me jump. A soft touch on the shoulder could make me cower. The thought of being away, of being alone for the first time, it felt impossible. I'd ached to be on my own in the past, and now I'd cling to whatever I could grasp. Any inkling of care I could sense. For the most part, I followed the eating schedule from the therapist. The stress at mealtimes did not go away, and knowing how dangerous the situation had become only added to my anxiety. I wanted the external concern to stop, tired of the talks and the scrutiny, and there was a part I desperately wanted at the time, the role of a pregnant teenager, no less. I focused on Juno and avoided the core of the issue. Snacks had been a void in my life, something before bed, unthinkable, but I'd force it down. My weight began to rise. I drank smoothies with blueberries and avocado and protein powder that made me gassy. I was managing the snacks, slowly training my body to chew and swallow and digest food again, to stay calm, to not have to get drunk first. Not ideal, but at least some pounds were returning. I had to travel to Los Angeles for my final Juno audition, which was more of a screen test. I'm the first to admit that I am not right for something, but this was one of those rare occasions where, by page 5, I couldn't fathom not doing it. I just knew. I read Diablo Cody's screenplay on the floor of my bedroom in Halifax. Her wit opened up a new vernacular. It was organic and honest. I'd been craving something like this, a character like this, as an actor and an audience member. This I could do. Still too thin, but much better. I flew to LA with my mother. I had gone from being independent very young, moving out at 16, to a kid with their mother traveling alongside them. The thought of functioning alone felt too risky, and I could not take any chances. A suggestion from the well-meaning therapist that I don't think was the best decision. As I grew more confident in my queerness, her denial grew too. Before she was a teacher, my mom worked for Air Canada, not as a flight attendant, but as a passenger attendant. My mother had been forever terrified of flying. For the takeoff, she'd close her eyes and braces tight. Turbulence, and you witness her heart jump. A sort of shiver runs through the body. I let her know that it's okay. It'll pass. It wrenches my heart watching my mother afraid. A window to her pain. She had a lot of that in her life. We reached altitude. My anxiety was fluttering. On a plane, you have no choice but to sit, body pressed into the seat, nowhere to flee. I obsessively went over the pages for the audition, running the dialogue in my head. I wrote it out over and over, a process that helps me remember. My mother finally calmed and focused on a movie. We flew from Halifax to Toronto, where we met Michael Cera and his father on our Los Angeles flight. For this audition, I was to read 30 pages of the script, mostly with Michael, the lengthiest audition I had ever done. But having just binged Arrested Development, I was stoked. His humor, original and grounded, emotions on his sleeve. We sat in the middle of the plane. Michael and his father were on the other side of the aisle. We exchanged pleasantries. He was quiet, but exuded kindliness. After takeoff, Michael promptly lowered the meal tray, crossed his arms over it, and rested his head to sleep. He stayed that way until we started our descent. I looked on in admiration and disbelief. How could he be so relaxed? I pressed back my seat, reclining it more. I could see my mom's anxious knees bounce. Even though it was implied the role was mine before the screen test, my heart still burst with excitement when I got the call. One of those rare occasions, a character who filled me with joy. I'd been cast, a dream role. Initially, we were supposed to make the film a couple months after the screen test, but it ended up being pushed, which was good. More time to recover, no excuses. Drastically better with food, albeit still self-restricting. Work helped me. Being on the set was healing. Flashes of torture, not following me home, and I was making a point to fuel my body. Not perfect, but a hell of a lot better. I had something meaningful to focus on after feeling unequivocally no meaning at all. Depression had sucked me dry. It was a job where I felt comfortable, able to start from a grounded place, versus outside of my body, trying to crawl back in. Hair, wardrobe, and makeup at work was typically a nightmare for me. Ironically, playing a pregnant teenager was one of the first times I felt a modicum of autonomy on set. I was wearing a fake belly, but not being hyper-feminized. For me, Juno was emblematic of what could be possible, a space beyond the binary. While filming in Vancouver, I stayed at the Sutton Place, or the Slutton Place, as some of the industry refer to it, a cavernous hotel with dated decor. It's located in downtown Vancouver and has long-stay units where actors frequently reside. My mother and I shared a 2-bedroom suite, and her, being the daughter of an Anglican minister born in 1954 in St. John, New Brunswick, well, it made it complicated when I met someone, the first woman I had a suitably consensual sexual relationship with. I was taken aback the moment I saw Olivia Thirlby. Embodied in bold, her long brown hair moved in slow motion. We were the same age, but she seemed so much older, capable, and centered. Sexually open, far removed from where I was at the time, but the chemistry was palpable. It pulled me in. I was embarrassingly shy with Olivia. She had much more experience. I was closed off. It was rare I let anything in, but I felt comfortable with her, and I began to poke my head out of its shell. We became friends quickly, spending a lot of time together. We stood in her hotel room. Billie Holiday played. She was about to start making lunch when she looked directly at me and said point blank, "I'm really attracted to you." I'm really attracted to you too. At that, we started sucking face. It was on. I had an all-encompassing desire for her. She made me want in a way that was new, hopeful. It was one of the first times someone would make me come, the first time I would open up. And we started having sex all the time. Her hotel room, in our trailers, at work, once in a tiny private room in a restaurant. What were we thinking? We thought we were subtle. Being intimate with Olivia helped my shame dissipate. I didn't see a glint of it in her eyes, and I wanted that, done feeling wrenched about who I am. I do not know if my mom suspected anything. She probably just thought Olivia and I had become fast pals, which was true, but still, I kept it hidden. Olivia came to my suite maybe once. We would sometimes hang out in Michael's room, and once Jonah Hill came to visit. It was after they had made Superbad, but before it had come out. There was weed and gin. Michael had a groovy little keyboard out and was tinkering around with Jonah. He would make music when he wasn't filming, just always being perfectly, annoyingly cool. We all got baked and wandered Vancouver together. We trekked down to Stanley Park, a massive, jaw-dropping green oasis. The gargantuan trees bring you to your knees. The Douglas firs, the western red cedars, some towering up to 249 feet. All of these moments, brand new adventures. Making Juneau reinvigorated me, inspired me, strengthened me. We said our sad goodbyes in a curling rink, a very Canadian rap party. My heart hurt as I traveled home. Switching planes in Toronto, I boarded a flight back to Halifax, listening to the moldy peaches as we broke through the clouds on our descent. I stared out the window, nothing but trees and lakes and rivers below. What will happen with that little indie? I wondered as the flight landed on the tarmac. The sudden lurch caused me to jump.